Welcome back, class. We've spent this entire year so far learning how to graph linear equations and how to solve linear equations. Today, we're starting something brand new where we're talking about quadratic equations. So, with it being March Madness and us talking about quadratic equations, I can't help but make a basketball comparison. A linear equation would be if you were shooting free throws like Shaq, and you were just throwing the ball as hard as you could in a straight line right at the rim. You're not going to make very many free throws using linear equations. On the other hand, a quadratic equation is if you were to throw the ball and it would make a nice arc and land in the basket. Okay, so quadratic equations are curved and they form a U shape or the path of a basketball going into a hoop. Okay, so now that we've got that comparison out of the way, let's talk about what a quadratic equation is and what they look like. A parabola is the shape of that graph that's created in a quadratic equation, okay? And that shape can be a U-shaped, okay? Or like I said, it can be like a basketball and kind of an upside down U. Also, we need to know about the standard form, okay? The standard form of a quadratic equation is the form that it's usually written in, and it looks like this: y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So when we did linear equations, it was y equals mx plus b, okay? But when we do quadratic equations, our formula is going to look like this: y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So that's just kind of some vocabulary to get out of the way. Let's talk about different parts of a quadratic equation. All right. Today we're going to focus on three parts of a parabola. Okay, three parts of that curve. And the first thing that we're going to focus on is the axis of symmetry. Okay, the axis of symmetry is the imaginary line that divides a parabola into two parts. So here's a parabola here, and the axis of symmetry, or the AOS, as we call it sometimes, would be this red dotted line here. It's the line that if I were to fold it on top of the other side, it would match up perfectly. Okay, so that's the axis of symmetry, the line that goes down the middle of a parabola where it's symmetrical on both sides. All right, there's a formula to find that axis of symmetry, and that formula is x equals negative b over 2a. Okay, and we'll work on how to find that in just a minute. The other thing that you need to know is the vertex. Okay, that's another part of the parabola. The vertex is the turning point of the parabola. Okay, either the highest point, if you're shooting a basket, okay, the highest point of the ball, or if it's a U-shaped curve, the lowest point. So here's my vertex right down here. Okay, and that's where that graph turns. Okay, see how this graph is going down, 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 down. It gets to the vertex, and now the graph is going up, 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 up. It's the turning point of that parabola. Okay, and then the last thing that we want to talk about is the direction of the parabola. The direction, okay? This particular parabola is facing upwards. It's an upward-facing parabola, or it looks like a smile. Okay? Anytime when the A is positive, the parabola, it opens up like a smile. Positive smile. When things are positive, I smile. On the other hand, anytime the A is negative, then the parabola opens down like a mean frown face. Okay, when things are negative, then you're sad or you're angry. Okay, so the parabola would open down if the A was negative. All right, so now that we know those three things, axis of symmetry, vertex, and direction, let's look at a couple of examples and see if we can find these three things in the examples. Here's an example of a quadratic equation. I know it's a quadratic equation because my x variable is squared. It's raised to the second power. Okay, so I know that the graph of this thing is going to be in some sort of a parabola. Okay, let's start off just by defining what's my a, what's my b, and what's my c. Remember that the standard equation is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so if it's y equals ax squared, I'm looking for what number is in front of this x when I'm looking for my a. And it looks like there's nothing there, so we know that there must be a 1 there. So that means my A is 1. Okay, and then my B is the number that's in front of this other x, the x that's not squared, and that's a 6. And my C in this case is a 10. All right, so now that I've defined those 3 parts of my quadratic equation, I can go ahead and find my axis of symmetry. If you remember in our notes just a second ago, we knew that the axis of symmetry was x equals negative b over 2a. Okay, and I know what my b is, and I know what my a is, so I can find the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is going to look like this. X equals negative, and then my b is 6. So negative 6 all over 2 times a, and my a is 1. All right, so then I can just simplify this thing out to find out what my axis of symmetry is. I've got a negative 6 in the numerator, and in the denominator, 2 times 1 is 2. So it's 2. Negative 6 divided by 2. And I get x equals negative 3. That's my axis of symmetry. When x is negative 3, that's where that dotted line on my parabola is going to be. Okay, so my axis of symmetry is x equals negative 3. Now, I'm going to use that to find my vertex. The axis of symmetry has to go through your vertex because it's that line that goes down the middle, and your vertex is in the middle. So I'm going to use my axis of symmetry to find my vertex. This is how you do it. I know that x equals negative 3. So in my equation up here, instead of x, I'm going to put negative 3. Okay? And you want to be really careful how you write this. Okay? Because how you type it into your calculator really, really matters. Okay? You can't just type in random numbers and expect to get the right thing. So how you type it into your calculator really matters. So that's why I write it a really, really particular way on the notes here so that you can do the same thing. Make sure that you write it the way that I'm writing it. It's super important. Okay? It's a detail that's very important. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewrite my quadratic equation, except instead of x, I'm going to put negative 3. Check it out. Y equals, and again, this is the important part here. My x I'm going to put in parentheses. So I'm going to do negative 3 squared. Okay, and it's important that I take just a second to explain that. If you type in without parentheses, you just type in negative 3 squared, what your calculator thinks is it thinks negative times 3 squared. And 3 squared is 9, so then it would be negative 9. Okay, and that's not what we're trying to describe here. What we're trying to describe is negative 3 squared, or negative 3 times negative 3. And negative 3 times negative 3 is not negative 9. It's positive 9. Okay, so if you put it in your calculator in parentheses, then the calculator goes, oh, okay, negative 3 times negative 3, that's positive 9. But if you don't use parentheses, your calculator doesn't understand what you're asking, and it does 3 squared and then makes it negative, and you're going to end up with the wrong answer. Okay, so it's important that this is how you type it into your calculator. Parentheses, negative 3, parentheses, squared. All right, then I've got plus 6 times negative 3 plus 10. Okay? And again, you can just type this whole thing into your calculator and it will tell you exactly what y is. I'm going to kind of break it down into parts here. I've got y equals negative 3 squared is 9. 6 times negative 3 is negative 18. And then plus 10. And then 9 minus 18 plus 10, I get y equals, what is that, 1? 1. Okay, so I know that my x is negative 3, and I know that my y is 1, so the vertex, that point where my parabola changes, that's going to be at negative 3, 1. That's that point where my parabola turns. All right? And then finally, the last thing that I want to know is the direction. Is this parabola going to make a smiley face, or is it going to make a frown face? Okay? And so this is really easy. All you have to do is look at your A. If it's positive, then smile. If it's negative, it would be a frown. But in this case, my A is positive, so my parabola, I'm just going to draw a picture of it. You could write opens up if you wanted to, but I'm just going to show that mine looks like this. My parabola looks like that. It looks like a smiley face. Okay, so there's the three things that we need to know. The axis of symmetry, that tells you where this line is that folds your parabola in half. Most importantly, it tells you the x value of your vertex. Okay, and once you know the x value of your vertex, you can plug it in to find the y value of your vertex. And this point is really, really important in parabolas. Okay, so that's really what I'm looking for is this point. I have to find my axis of symmetry so that I can find my vertex. Okay, I know my vertex is negative 3, 1, and I know that my parabola is going to open upwards like a smile. Hee. All right, excellent. That's example 1. Let's try example 2. All right, in example 2, again, I've got a quadratic equation. I know that because my x variable is squared. Okay, so it's going to make a parabola. All right, again, the first thing that I want to do, especially at the beginning here, is I want to define what's my A, what's my B, and what's my C. Okay, in this case, I look at my number in front of my x squared term, and there's nothing there, so my A must be a 1. I look in front of my x term, and I've got a negative 4, so my B must be negative 4. And then I look in front of my constant, or I just look at my constant. There's no variable there, and it's a 3, so my C must be 3. Okay? Writing those down helps a lot when you're trying to find your axis of symmetry. Okay? You don't have to look at your equation anymore. You just know what your A, B, and your C are. My formula for axis of symmetry is x equals negative B over 2A. Okay? So I look for my B, which is negative 4. And then in my denominator, I've got 2 times A, which is 1. Okay, so this negative 4 thing, this is where a lot of my students make mistakes. So let me just talk about it for a moment. My B is negative 4. And I want the opposite of B. So I'm looking at the opposite of negative 4. So again, see how I put my B in parentheses? That way I don't just write, oh, negative 4. Okay, no. It's the opposite of B. So I want the opposite of negative 4. Okay, it's tricky. Very, very tricky, especially if you have problems with negatives already. Okay, don't think of this as a negative B. Think of it as the opposite of B. Okay, the opposite of B. So if my B is negative 4, I want the opposite of negative 4. The opposite of negative 4 is 4. And then 2 times 1 is 2. 4 divided by 2, I get x equals 2. Okay, so there's the x value of my vertex. Now I need to plug this in to my original equation to find my y value. Right? So my original equation is y equals, instead of x squared, I'm going to put 2 squared. Again, in parentheses, it will help you a lot. Okay, don't try and take shortcuts. Just do it right. Do things the right way, and then you're going to get the right answer. We get in trouble when we try and find shortcuts. Okay, so x squared minus 4 times 2 plus 3. Very good. You could just type all that into your calculator. Okay, 2 squared is 4. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 plus 3. So now when I do 4 minus 8 plus 3, I end up with y equals negative 1. And I know that my x is 2 and my y is negative 1, so my vertex is 2, negative 1. Okay? Again, that's the point where my parabola turns. It's the bottom of my parabola in this case. Okay, the last thing that I want to know today is what direction is my parabola heading. For the direction, I just look at my A. Okay, look at your A. If it's positive, smile. If it's negative, frown. Okay, in this case, my A is positive, so my parabola opens up like a smile. All right, example 2 down. Let's try one last example. Here it is, the third and final example. Now would be a great chance for you to test yourself. Pause the video, try this one on your own, see if you get the right answers. Okay, if you need some extra help, go ahead, listen to my explanation. Here we go. This is a quadratic equation. I know that because I've got an x squared as one of my terms. Okay, so it's going to be a parabola, it's going to be a curve. My A, the number in front of my x squared, is negative 2. My B is 4. My C is negative 1. I need this information to help me find my axis of symmetry. My axis of symmetry is x equals the opposite of B over 2A. The opposite of B. So my B is 4. So it's going to be the opposite of 4 over 2 times negative 2. Okay, so when I simplify this, I get my numerator is going to be negative 4. My denominator is also going to be negative 4. 2 times negative 2. Negative 4. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 gives me 1. X equals 1. Now that I know the x of my vertex, I can plug it in to find the y of my vertex. I just plug 1 into this equation up here. Okay, so that equation is y equals negative 2 times x squared, but instead of x, I'm going to use a 1, plus 4 times x, but instead of x, I'm going to use a 1, and then minus 1. All right, so you could plug all this into your calculator. Your calculator will do it perfectly fine as long as you put your x in parentheses. Everything will work out fine. Okay? I'm going to kind of do it by hand a little bit here. I do 1 squared. 1 times 1 is 1. And then 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Plus 4 minus 1. All right, so when I combine all those things, negative 2 plus 4 minus 1, I get 1. Y equals 1. So x equals 1 and y equals 1, so my vertex is 1, 1. Finally, I want to know which direction does this parabola head. Is it a downward facing parabola or an upward facing parabola? I look at my A. If it's positive, it's a happy face. If it's negative, it's a frown face. In this case, my A is negative, so my parabola is going downwards like a frown. Okay? So today, those are the 3 things that you need to be able to find given a quadratic equation. Can you find the axis of symmetry? Can you find the vertex? And do you know which direction that parabola is heading? If you can do those 3 things, then you're great. You're ready for what we're going to do next. If you can't do those 3 things, go ahead and rewatch this video or ask me some questions in class tomorrow. Circle the parts in your notes that you don't understand so that we can figure those things out tomorrow. There are 3 examples in your notes for you to try on your own. Try those 3. I'll give you the answers tomorrow so that we can check on those. But try those 3. I hope they come easy to you, and I'll see you next time.